On Air Force One this week, President Trump, when he was speaking to reporters, seemed to leave the door open to recognizing Russia's annexation of Crimea, saying we'll have to see what happens when the issue comes up in the meeting. Is the U.S. endorsing the idea that international borders can be redrawn by force? Is this actually a topic?
No, that's not the position of the United States, but I think the president...
Which is why it was newsworthy when he said it.
Well, I don't know that that's what he said. I think the president often says we'll see, to show that he's willing to talk to foreign leaders about a range of issues and hear their perspective. President Putin was pretty clear with me about it, and my response was we're going to have to agree to disagree on Ukraine.
But that's not up for negotiation.
That's not the position of the United States.
Right, but saying we'll see suggests might be.
Well, we'll see.
Well, that's shocking for our European allies.
I don't think it's shocking at all. As I've said, the position of the United States is clear on this.
Right, but is that open to changing as the United States position if the president's saying the door is open?
The president makes the policy.
Good job. When he said it's not shocking at all, everybody watching that could have finished the sentence. But John Bolton couldn't say it, but he probably wanted to say it's not shocking at all. Donald Trump is the president of the United States. So,
just like he owns the separation policy of children at the border, if this policy is announced by this president, we'll see what happens, but it will be owned by him.
That would be so shocking. To the extent there's any rule in international relations that keeps the world from being a jungle, it's the idea that you cannot use military force to change borders. No. The idea that people are even thinking about accepting what the Russians have done in Crimea is stunning. In a world where you think you can't be stunned anymore, that is stunning. Yeah.
So there's a lot of daylight between President Trump and National Security Advisor John Bolton regarding opinions of Russia and Vladimir Putin. As recently as a year ago, Bolton wrote an op-ed in The Telegraph entitled "Vladimir Putin looked Trump in the eye and lied to him."
Correct.
We negotiate with Russia at our peril.
Correct. I like the cut of this guy's jib. I've always said
Bolton called Putin a serial liar who committed a, quote, act of war by interfering in the 2016 election.
Good on ya.
And as Russia's invasion of Crimea was beginning, Bolton wrote another op-ed slamming Putin's agenda while arguing the West should arm Ukraine to counter Moscow's moves.
Who is this guy, David Ignatius, and where has he been all my life? More importantly, where has he been
this weekend? Where was he yesterday?
You know, it actually, for those of us who have been concerned about John Bolton, the two areas, at least for me, where I took some comfort that John Bolton would be inside there would be Russia and Iran. It's going to be very interesting to see. And North Korea, my God.
He was the hawk who was always pointing out the fallacy of trying to negotiate with the Kim family. I thought
by the way, and talked about actually bombing North Korea and bombing Iran. We're a long way from that.
Well, that was then. This is now. Mm-hmm. I thought that little passage you showed of Bolton yesterday was one of the most squirm-worthy I have watched, in the sense that every time he was pressed on what is our policy about Russian continued holding of Crimea, for example, he just said, "We'll see." Well, do you mean to say that could be? These officials are terrified of contradicting a president whose judgments from hour to hour, day to day, they just don't know. And I think that's one of the great untold stories in national security. At the Pentagon, at the National Security Council, at the State Department, you have people who literally don't know from one day to the next where the president's going to end up, and this is worrying our allies who try to look at this and are finally just shrugging their shoulders and saying, you know, we're just going to have to make our own plans. It's in Asia. The South Koreans and the Japanese, our key allies in Asia, have watched the conduct of the negotiations with North Korea in the same way. What's this guy going to do next?
Right.
They don't know, and they're beginning. My point is, they're beginning to make alternative plans for their security, and that's really what should concern us as they begin to move away from what's been a reliable American security umbrella toward different ways of thinking about how to stay safe.
I only wish Republicans on Capitol Hill would make alternative plans for what the GOP's national security plan looks like, Casey Hunt, because on the Hill, for those Republicans who are afraid of more fearful of a tweet being directed their way than North Korea taking advantage of us when it comes to nuclear negotiations. Republicans on the Hill are in the same position where they're afraid to speak out because they don't know what Donald Trump is going to say tomorrow. And here you have again the question hanging over Congress this week, even though, you know, Russia's telling Reuters that it's not on the agenda. Russia doesn't know whether it's on the agenda or not because, well, Donald Trump may put it on the agenda.
And, you know, we may not have any idea what the president actually says in this meeting. I mean, you'll remember one of the last times he encountered the Russian president, he didn't have a translator with him that was on the American side. So to a certain extent, we have no idea, you know, what those conversations are about. And I think, you know, this is one of the things where you have actually seen members of Congress come out and speak pretty forcefully about this president's relationship, about America's relationship with the Russians, about the dangers of Russian meddling in the election. You actually had the president acknowledge a little bit more along the lines of what happened and their attempts to sow discord in our elections than I had heard before in his interview with Maria Bartiromo. But, you know, I do think there's a serious divide on this. There are a lot of Republicans who didn't think that he enforced the sanctions strongly enough. So this is a potential opportunity, I think, for Republican members to step out front on something here.
Well, and Lindsey Graham actually decided to do so. Maybe it was coordinated with the White House. I don't know. But Lindsey stepped out pretty aggressively over the weekend. Take a look.
I'm concerned when the president tweets, you know, Russia denies they meddled in our election. When they say they didn't meddle, they're lying. So I'm glad the president is going to confront Putin, show him the evidence you got, Mr. President, because it's overwhelming. In many ways, this administration's been tough on Russia. We've armed the Ukraine, we've imposed sanctions, we've kicked out diplomats. But the idea that Russia did not meddle in our election is fake news. They did meddle in our election, and they're doing it again in 2018.
Please, nobody tell people on other networks that. I'm surprised more Republicans haven't spoken like that.
Yeah, and demonstrate that you can be supportive of the president, a team player on the Republican side, and still be honest and forthright and critical of Donald Trump when he deserves to be criticized. If you're a Russia hawk, you know, there's a lot to be happy with this administration about. Many have talked about it, the extent to which we've supplied arms to Ukraine, we've put interceptor missiles in Central Europe, sanctioned people who deserve sanctions, et cetera, et cetera. The exception to that rule is in Syria, where the administration came in with the design of extricating America from Syria, handing that responsibility over to Russia, essentially outsourcing our responsibilities as a superpower to Syria. Russia is not going to maintain our interests. They're working hand in glove with Bashar al-Assad, and Bashar al-Assad sees a very valuable presence in the form of ISIS, in the form of terrorist groups, Islamist groups, which he can say, we're the force of civilization, they are darkness, you are with us or against us. Outsourcing our job in Syria to Russia, which I think is the extent to which there's any agenda for a summit between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, would be probably disastrous for American objectives. And beyond that, I see no reason to hold a summit, a presidential level summit, with Vladimir Putin, especially just months after he was accused of using chemical weapons in Ukraine.
Exactly.
Well, yeah,
in the UK.
In the UK and allowing what's going on in Syria. And we're talking about Donald Trump retreating. His cowardly retreat from the world, his cowardly proposal to retreat from Germany, his cowardly proposal to retreat from South Korea, and of course, his cowardly and disastrous proposal to retreat from the small presence that our troops have in Syria, where he wants to turn Syria over to Russia, to Assad, and to the Iranians. It is hard to find a single place where the investment of 4,000 to 5,000 American troops can alter the balance of power more on the globe than right there with three countries who consider themselves to be enemies of the United States.
No, look, there's a thread here, and it's obvious, and it's a pattern of American withdrawal from all these institutions and arrangements, and American withdrawal of troops, and American undermining of our alliances. And this is the worst possible way to walk into a summit with Vladimir Putin. the idea that we're flirting with the idea of recognizing the annexation of Ukraine. We're flirting with taking U.S. forces out of Germany. And by the way, 3/4 of U.S. forces have already come out of Germany since the end of the Cold War. The idea that we're criticizing the EU and the transatlantic relationship, what we're essentially saying is we have no more special relationship with our allies. We have no more special commitment to our allies than we are open to doing things with Mr. Putin.
I know we have to go, but David Ignatius, Donald Trump accused Barack Obama of being the founder of ISIS, of creating ISIS because of the speedy retreat from Iran. I mean, from Iraq. And so he's wanted to repeat the same mistake in Afghanistan. He wants to repeat the same mistake in South Korea. He wants to repeat the same mistake in Germany. He wants to repeat the same mistake in an area that you know a great deal about. Again, that's Syria. He wants America to cower and retreat from the world. This isn't even leading from behind. This is just being behind.
Joe, why President Trump has decided he wants to pull these troops out after what were hard-won victories. The truth is that in 4 years, under a policy initially launched by President Obama, embraced by President Trump, carried through by him in a sensible way, we had an overwhelming victory against ISIS. It's nearly completed. Why Trump now wants to lose that leverage is a puzzle that generals, admirals, all the senior Pentagon officials just are struggling to understand. In effect, we are in the process of turning the future of Syria over to Russia and seeing Syria as a battleground simply to contain Iranian influence moving west. It's an important goal, but it's not the end of Syria policy. One of the most interesting things that's happened in the last few months is that Russia and Israel now have found common cause on some elements of Syria policy. That's what's really driving the agenda towards this Helsinki summit is the Israeli-Russian agreement about what Syria should look like, which the United States is going to go along with. In the meantime, all that hard work that we did in the East, I've been there 3 times traveling with our troops, and I'll tell you, they worked hard to get the stability that they have there now. It's going to go away as soon as those troops come out.
All right, so speaking of Russia, a controversial call in the Russia-Spain match
Vladimir
leads
Putin
to
actually,
one of the greatest upsets
the VAR.
in World Cup history.
It's not really an upset if it's a scam.
Oh, now. You don't know that.
They tackled
now, a lot of people are
2
wondering
Spain players in the box.
who was at the controls. We're going to discuss that ahead on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.